We finalized a historic peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. After half a century, Israel and the United Arab Emirates will fully normalize their diplomatic relations. Nobody thought this was something that could happen for a long time. This is the most important diplomatic breakthrough since the Egypt-Israel peace agreement was signed over 40 years ago. We have Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, here. Thank you, David, for being here. We very much, you would agree that this was a big day for Israel and a big day for the world. Good. Thank you, David. You've been fantastic, too. Fantastic ambassador and representative of our country. Thank you very much. The deal that was reached today will enable Muslims to have far greater ability to visit many historic sites in Israel and to peacefully pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is very important to them, which they've wanted to have access to for many, many decades. This is a monumental step to forging ties of cooperation in the Middle East, and I think you're going to have other countries come forward. I can tell you we already do, and they want to make a deal. You could have peace in the Middle East. It would be fantastic. Israel is also suspending settlements in the West Bank, which is a big deal, a bold step toward achieving peace. Israel and the United Arab Emirates have also agreed to immediately expand and accelerate scientific collaboration to develop effective treatments and vaccines to defeat the China virus. They've both been hit. Virtually every country has been hit, 188 countries, and to save lives in their region and in their world. So they are working very much on the vaccines also with us. And again, some very good news is going to take place with respect to that. Our unprecedented diplomatic engagements laid the groundwork for this historic peace agreement, which was just announced a little while ago today. We will not rest as we continue to work toward a world of greater harmony and prosperity for all. I want to thank Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates, two fantastic people, for their vision and their leadership. And I look forward to hosting them at the White House very soon to formally sign the agreement. We'll probably be doing it over the next, I would say, 3 weeks. And they'll be coming to Washington. So that was a tremendous day. That was a tremendous thing that happened. And it's a great sign. We have a lot of other interesting things going on with other nations also having to do with peace agreements. And a lot of big news is coming over the next few weeks. And I'm sure you'll be very impressed. And more importantly, it's a great thing for our country, a great thing for the world. So thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I want to ask you about school-age kids and food. One of the real problems when you shut down the schools, these are kids on reduced and free lunch programs. They need these meals to make it through their day. And with districts shutting down school, what, if anything, can the federal government do to make sure that the kids still get decent meals as long as the schools are out?
Well, you know, we don't want the schools shut down. We want the schools to open. And especially very young children handle it, all children, but especially very young children handle it very well. So we want schools open. We don't want to be in that position. We want schools open. We've made payment, and we would, frankly, if the school isn't going to open, we would much rather follow the child with the payment, give the money to the child, meaning the parents of the child, and let the parents do what they have to do, including bringing the child to another school, because we're finding that whether it's parents or children, people want to get back to school. They want to have their life back. Some people say the Democrats don't want schools open because that's where you have a lot of polling booths. And if you have a school closed, you can't very easily have polling booths at the school. And that's becoming, I think, maybe we'll be able to show that as fact. But that's another thing that they're doing to try and keep people away from because if you look at what's happened over the last few weeks, just look at the few instances where this has happened, it's turned out to be fraudulent. Well, if you look at New York, it was fraudulent. If you look at Paterson, New Jersey, it was fraudulent. Of course there is. The whole thing is a mess. In fact, Carolyn Maloney's opponent he's gone crazed. He said they took the election away from him, and he may be right. I think they should redo that election. And if you look at Virginia, it's terrible. Look at some of the things that have happened in California. Look at California, where they found 1 million non-eligible voters. That was done by Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch. We have to have an honest election. And if it's not going to be an honest election, I guess people have to sit down and think really long and hard about it. But if the post office, if they're not going to approve a bill, and the post office therefore won't have the money, and if they're not going to approve a big bill, a bigger bill, and they're not going to have the $3.5 billion for the universal mail-in votes, how can you have those votes? What would mean is the people will have to go to the polls and vote, like the old days, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They have to go to it doesn't say anybody's taking the vote away, but it means that the universal mail-ins don't work. Absentees do work. It's a very different thing. An absentee, where you make an application and you send it in, they send you a vote, it's different. But so, Caitlin, I'm not saying anything wrong with voting. I want them to vote. But that would mean that they'd have to go to a voting booth like they used to and vote.
Even if they don't feel safe voting in person, people want to vote by mail because.
Well, they're going to have to feel safe, and they will be safe, and we will make sure that they're safe. And we're not going to have to spend $3.5 billion to do it. And when you go to a voting, it would be wonderful if we had voting ID, and some states have that and some states don't because they can't get it passed. Most states want it. But we want people to vote, but we want people to vote so when they vote, it means one vote. It doesn't mean ballots all over the place. You saw what was happening in Virginia, where piles of ballot applications are dropped all over the state. They had them named after dogs. They had them named after dead people. We want to have an accurate vote. I'm not doing this for any reason. Maybe the other turns out to be my advantage. I don't know. I can't tell you that. But I do know this. I just want an accurate vote. And it's a fair question, by the way. So does everybody else. Okay.
Mr. President, how does the accord today between Israel and the UAE help struggling and persecuted Christians in the Middle East?
Help what?
How does it help struggling and persecuted Christians in the Middle East, the deal today?
Well, I think it's going to. I think it's a big start. And you're right about that. Christians have been persecuted by some countries in particular in the Middle East. And I think this is a big start. It's going to be a very strong start, very powerful start. And it's something that I will tell you, I've told David, and I've told every one of our negotiators, if you look at the way Christians have been treated in some countries, it's beyond disgraceful. It's if I had information and if I had absolute proof, some of the stories that we've heard, which is not easy to get, I would go in and do a number to those countries like you wouldn't believe what they do to Christians in the Middle East. And it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. You're right. It's a very big part of the overall negotiation. And as countries come in, for instance, UAE has agreed very strongly to represent us. I think they will very well with respect to Christianity, because in the Middle East, it's not treated well. It's not treated well at all. It's treated horribly and very unfairly. And it's criminal what's happened. And that's for many, many years. I think it's a great question and it's a very unfair situation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Kudlow said that there's a routine check-in call with China on the Phase 1 trade deal. My question is, what if they bring up TikTok and also WeChat? Would you instruct your team to engage them on that executive
We have
order?
a deadline of September 15th. And whether it's Microsoft, I understand, and others are negotiating. We also said that obviously it's worthless if we don't allow them into the country. So we said that the United States Treasury is going to be getting something out of this deal, something very substantial. But what we want is total security. But we have a deadline of September 15th. So I know Microsoft and others are very interested in it. But that's our deadline. And it has to be proven to be totally secure. We don't want to have any information going into China with what we've been through. And I have to tell you, you talked about the deal. You mentioned the phase one deal. Well, the phase one deal, it's a very interesting situation because you've been hearing the largest order of corn in history, the largest order of soybeans, the largest order of beef. They've done more than they've ever done. So you're going to have to figure that one out. With where I'm coming from, I could have, because they see my attitude. My attitude toward China is not friendly, but they have gone into orders that are extremely large, and our farmers are very happy. But with what they did with respect to the pandemic, the plague that came in from China, it just is a different feeling. It was an incredible deal, but I have a very different feeling. But they are giving the Midwest, our farmers, among the largest orders they've ever seen. Somebody told me today, Bob Lighthizer, said it's about 40% of what they're selling now is going to China. So maybe they're trying to make me change my mind a little bit, because you know my attitude on China, and it hasn't been very good. Well, we're not talking to them. No, we're talking to the companies. In theory, it's a company, but it's a company within China. That means China. And the deal will have to be substantially beneficial to the United States, and we need total security. Okay?
Mr.
Mr.
President.
Yes,
Mr. President, can you say whether you yourself think that annexation should be off the table for Israel, and if so, have you communicated that to
So not off
Prime
the
Minister?
table. No, it's something they've discussed, but Israel has agreed not to do that. I mean, more than just off the table, they've agreed not to do it. And I think that was very important. And I think it was a great concession by Israel. And I think it was a very smart concession by Israel. But David, do you have anything further to add on
Prime
that?
Minister was pretty clear today at his own press conference that he considers this to be a temporary suspension and that the deal would still be open to him at some point in the future. I'm asking what you think he should do. Should he
Well,
actually
right now,
write it
all I
off?
can say, it's off the table. So I can't talk about sometime into the future. That's a big statement. But right now, it's off the table. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Ambassador?
Yes, the word suspend was chosen carefully by all the parties. Suspend by definition, look it up, that means temporary halt. It's off the table now, but it's not off the table permanently.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just to follow some of the questions that Caitlin was asking, you said you do want an accurate vote. Would
That's
you
right.
direct the Postmaster General to reverse some of the policy changes that have
No,
occurred
not at
there
all.
in order to prevent delays?
No, I wouldn't do that at all. No, I want the post office to run properly, but which makes sense. They would need a lot more money if they're going to be taking in tens of millions of ballots that just come out of the sky from nowhere. And so they need additional financial help. It's a part of the bill that the Democrats don't want to make because they want $1 trillion, much bigger part of the bill. They want $1 trillion to go to states that are run by governors who happen to be Democrats who have not done a good job for many, many years. And those are states that owe a lot of money and need a lot of money. They're talking about $1 trillion. So the post office and the $3.5 billion for the votes themselves, which sounds like a lot of money they're looking for. $3.5 billion. Think of that. $3.5 billion to have mail-in ballots. Again, absentee good, universal mail-in very bad. Please.
One quick follow-up. Given that the negotiations are still ongoing about whether to get more money to the Postal Service, why not put more resources and more money yourself? Find a way to do that to make sure there isn't.
Well, they can do it very easily. All they have to do is make a deal. If they make a deal, the Postal Service is taken care of. The money they need for the mail-in ballots would be taken care of if we agree to it. That doesn't mean we're going to agree to it, but all they have to do is make a deal. But again, more important to them is not that. That's a lot of money, but it's small time compared to the other. What they want to do, and very, very, very strongly what they want to do, is bail out cities that are run by Democrats and have been for many years. And these cities and states have done very badly, and they desperately need money for that. And we're open to something, but we're not open to the kind of money that they need. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, very quickly, my question for you is just
Just 1 second, please. Go
what are
ahead.
you doing as president to make sure there is a free and fair election?
That the what?
What are you doing as president to make sure there is a free and fair election?
So everyone talks about Russia, Russia, Russia. They talk about China, China. They talk about all of these different countries that come in and run our elections, which is false. But what they don't talk about are things like very loose mail-in ballots, universal in nature, that frankly, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, all of these countries that we are reading about, hearing about, and in some cases they're writing about intelligence-wise, these countries can grab those ballots or print forgeries of those ballots, and they would go out and they would have a field day. This is the easiest way for the mail-in ballots is the easiest way for a country like a China or a Russia or a North Korea or Iran. I hear Iran too, that was part of the report. This would be very easy for them. This is much easier than, well, we have been very strong. Now, if you remember, President Obama was informed about Russia by the FBI in September. The election was in November. President Obama decided to do absolutely nothing about it. People don't mention that very much anymore. That's a lost fact. But he was informed very powerfully that they're going to do, and President Obama did nothing. We have done a lot, and we've really shored it up. But what people can never prepare for are millions and millions of mail-in ballots, because they can be forged, they can be captured, they can be taken. No, well, that's a very hard thing to do. We have to make sure that we can do that. Please.
Mr. President, after 3.5 years, do you regret it all the lying you've done to the American people? On
All the what?
everything, all the lying, all the dishonesties
That who has done?
you have done.
Go
Tens of thousands.
ahead, please. Please. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the payroll tax
Go ahead.
cut. One, is it going to be optional or mandatory for employers to defer and not collect the payroll tax?
So we're-
if I have a follow-up on
The
that.
payroll tax is very important and a very big benefit to people, as you know, to companies, because we want the companies to be strong, but now directly to people. And it's a very big number, and we're taking care of it. And this will go directly to the people, the workers within the company. It's a payroll tax. It's called a payroll tax cut. We're cutting the payroll tax, and it's a very large number, and that will go directly to the workers of the company.
Well, if employers collect that through FICA, will that be are they going to be required not to collect that money?
You mean later on? You mean later on at a later
Right now,
date?
so September 1, when I get my paycheck, will
The
it be up to my-
employers will collect it and give it, most likely. The employers will collect it and give it. Okay? Please, go ahead.
Follow
Mr.
up on that?
President, I have two questions. The first one on domestic politics. There
Can't understand a
are
word you're
claims
saying.
circulating in social media that Kamala Harris is not eligible to run for vice president because she was an anchor baby, I hope. Do you or can you definitively say whether or not Kamala Harris is eligible, meets the legal requirements to run as vice president?
So I just heard that. I heard it today that she doesn't meet the requirements. And by the way, the lawyer that wrote that piece is a very highly qualified, very talented lawyer. I have no idea if that's right. I would have assumed the Democrats would have checked that out before she gets chosen to run for vice president. But that's a very serious. You're saying that they're saying that she doesn't qualify because she wasn't born in this country.
No, she was born in this country, but her parents did not. The claims say that her parents did not receive their permanent residence at that
Yeah.
time.
I don't know about it. I just heard about it. I'll take a look. Back in the
Mr. President, a follow-up on UNGA. Ambassador Kelly Craft recently said that she is hoping that you might be able to deliver the speech in front of the UN General Assembly in person, even though other leaders will be sending in their video recordings. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I'm thinking about going directly to the UN to do the speech. A lot of people will not, because of COVID, will not be able to be there, as you know. But I think it's appropriate if we can do it. I'll do it directly. And again, this will not be like in the past, because some countries won't be able to escape the problems they're having. You know, countries are having a tremendous problem with the China virus. So we'll see what happens. But I would prefer doing it. I can do it the other way. I can do it viral. as they say. I can do it in that form, but I'd rather be at the United Nations, deliver it. I think it better represents the country. Also, I feel sort of at least a semi-obligation as the President of the United States to be at the United Nations to deliver what will be an important speech.
So good if the room is empty?
Well, the room won't be empty. The room will have different people there and representatives of countries. But I can understand how it's very difficult for countries to be there. They won't be there only for that reason. They'd love to be there. I've already had people call, in fact, say a couple of them, "I'd love to be there. If you want, I'll be there." I said, "Don't be there. You don't have to be there." No, the room would be. I think the room will not be, although there may be a spacing requirement like you have in this room. This room was always packed. This room would be packed again if we had the seats open, but you have a spacing requirement. So I understand at the United Nations, they may have that too. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question on the peace deal, but if you don't mind, could I defer my question to Mailin from Epic Times?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Please.
President.
Thank you.
I would like to ask your opinion about what recently happened in Hong Kong, recent attack on press freedom in Hong Kong, and Jimmy Lai was arrested. His newsroom was raided. How will the U.S. respond to this?
Well, I think it's a terrible thing, but one thing that we have done, we gave tremendous incentives to Hong Kong because of freedom. We want freedom. And we were giving tremendous economic incentives to Hong Kong, and we have now withdrawn all of those incentives. And it will be impossible for Hong Kong to compete with the United States with respect to that. It just won't be, because we've taken all of the incentives away. If you look at China with the World Trade Organization as an example, they're getting tremendous because they're considered a developing nation, which is ridiculous. Why should they be a developing nation, but we're not? And they get tremendous incentives. We have, by the way, told them it's unacceptable, and we've been doing that for a long time. They understand exactly how we feel, and big changes are being made. But with respect to Hong Kong, they get tremendous financial incentives so that they could do business and compete in the world. We've now withdrawn all of those incentives. It's going to be very hard for Hong Kong to compete. And I will tell you that the United States, and I say this from any standpoint you want to hear it, will end up making a lot more money because of it, because we lost a lot of business to Hong Kong. We made it very convenient for people to go there, for companies to go there. We've withdrawn all of that. And the United States will be a big beneficiary from an economic standpoint. But I hate to see what happened to Hong Kong, because freedom is a great thing. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.